Welcome to Trudge the Road. Trudge the Road is brought to you by Caron Treatment Centers. Caron is a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment with treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, offices in Bermuda, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. They can be reached by picking up the phone and give them a call, 1-800-854-6023, or you can visit their website at caron.org. That's caron.org. We are your hosts. I'm Rich, a recovered drug addict.
My name is Jerry. I'm a sober alcoholic.
Let's start the show by telling everybody, Jerry, why do we do this show?
Trudge the Road is a radio program dedicated to folks who suffer from the disease of addiction to alcohol and to drugs, as well as your family and your friends. Suffer tremendously. You have all kinds of questions. That's why we're here, hopefully to answer some of those questions, and with the good grace of the Lord, provide a solution to this incredible dilemma.
All right. We have a website. It's been revamped. It's looking good. TrudgeTheRoadRadio.com. I know a lot of folks have been hitting the YouTube episodes. Right. Those are prior episodes that we've done. You can get to those by going to youtube.com/TrudgeTheRoadRadio, all one word, or you can go to our website, TrudgeTheRoadRadio.com, and we have several episodes up there as well. Holidays are upon us.
Yes, they are.
And this is the time of the year. We talked a little bit about holidays in prior weeks, but they are coming up, and it's a dangerous time for those of us in recovery.
Slippery.
Very much so. I mean, you know, being a meth addict and a cocaine addict as I am, it was always a time for a white Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
You know, piling it up, looking for the Santa Claus beard. Those of you that are tweakers know exactly what I'm talking about. Not a good time because it's a time to escape a lot of feelings of inadequacy, which I suffer from. Times of depression, anxiety, and things of that nature. But Jerry, you in your recovery have put a whole different spin on it, and it's one of joy and happiness and excitement and family, and it's a good time.
It's you know, a lot of it is choice. But first, you know, let's just take a look at how alcohol affects our senses. Now, this even the typical average moderate drinker, when you consume alcohol, the first of your senses that it affects is your hearing. That's why drunk folks are so loud. They're not being obnoxious. They can't hear. The next thing it affects is your sense of smell. Your sense of smell diminishes, then taste, then sight, and then touch. So we go back to hearing. All right, now in the holiday season, this was my MO, was that I got drunk on Thanksgiving and sobered up about the 3rd or 4th of January, usually in a treatment center, and a lot of those are blurs. It's still a blur of going through that time period. But just think about it. You drink the alcohol, and your sense of hearing is affected immediately. You drink like I drink, and your sense of hearing is gone. So what are you missing? You're missing all the beautiful music of the holidays. All that, you're not hearing any of it. You know, you've anesthetized that sense. Your sense of smell, the next thing to go. What are you missing? All the beautiful aromas of Christmas, the turkey, the cookies, the Christmas trees, the snow, all those beautiful, beautiful smells. You have also anesthetized that sense. Now, the sense of taste. You don't get to taste all of those good cookies and all of those wonderful things, the fruit cakes and all the food of the holidays, because, you know, you just shove it down your throat, you know.
Fruit cakes?
Well, that may not be the best example.
I was going to say. Really? Right. That's one I usually avoid.
Okay, cancel the fruitcake. It's probably got booze in it anyway. And then, you know, your sight is the last one to go when you've got the drunk eyes, the beer goggles, and, you know, you can't see things. And you miss the whole holiday. That was what was so bad for me, is I missed it for years and years and years and years. And just like you, when I did get sober and get clean, the holidays were something I didn't look forward to. And on a personal note, it's that, you know, this disease, the disease of addiction, took my family, my personal family. They robbed me of my mom and my dad and both my brothers before I was 26 years old. And the bear of it is that my mom died on December 31st. My dad died on January 1st in different years. And my brother died in Southeast Asia in December also. So all of those deaths occurred right around the holidays. And that was all that, you know, I would really focus on, was this, you know, this tremendous sense of loss. Right. And then the music, it didn't make me happy. It started to depress me. And other people being happy made me angry. You know, so I was just absolutely miserable during the holidays, sad, depressed, and...
Did you resent people in their happiness?
Yes.
Because they
did.
were able to have a good time, and you unfortunately were just...
And again, the root of my problem is selfishness and self-centeredness. That's and it's all about me. And how dare you and your family? You're all getting together and having this wonderful time, and Santa's coming, and I'm sitting alone in this one-bedroom apartment, just miserable. And that was I just moved into my head. That was all that was. That's where I lived. That was the neighborhood. What was going on in between my ears, and everything I was experiencing in my sociology was just a negative. So what am I set up here for? I'm set up to drink and take drugs. I'm going to try to relieve that pain. But again, and as we've said so many times in this program, it's all about that connectedness that we have within the recovering community, that people recognize that when we're not ourselves and we're taking a turn for the worse, and will step up and bring it to your attention and try to offer you a solution to the dilemma that you're facing emotionally. And the holiday certainly does present that. And for me, it was a matter of a sponsor saying, why don't you make a decision? Why don't you make a decision to look at it differently? Why don't you make a decision to hear that beautiful music and just enjoy it and just try to hear? It's we only hear it once a year in these beautiful songs, and start to hear them. And then I did remember even back to when I was a little kid and those good Christmases and Frosty the Snowman, and it brought some pleasant memories, But what again is that I have a family. The family is the recovering community of where I live, and they are a tight family. We can't choose our relatives, but we can choose our friends. And these people have become my family, and I'm just every bit as involved with them, if not more so, than I would be with somebody who I'm blood related to. So what happened is then I started smelling Christmas again. I smelled that turkey. I smelled those cookies, not the fruitcake, of course. The snow, all of those wonderful, just taking it all in, and the taste, to be able to taste for the first time in so many years, all the glorious little tidbits that we have during the holiday season that are just absolutely wonderful. And I could see it all, and I could touch it all. All of those senses became alive, and I began to feel it. And then that love of the recovering community that I was so involved in just became contagious. And then suddenly, I'm loving the holidays.
I love the way you moved out of your head, moved out of your one-room apartment, and moved into society. Yeah. And I think you're making a great point, is to get involved. And you mentioned connectedness and that woven togetherness of the recovering community, and getting out of your head and getting out of your apartment. And maybe if you're having trouble like that, you can go do something for another. Maybe you can go out and volunteer. Maybe you could go out and wrap gifts. Maybe you can go out and purchase a turkey. Well, if you're not going to eat it in your one-bedroom apartment, why not take it to somebody who needs it?
Mm-hmm. It is, some of the best Christmases I've had have been, when I was homeless, basically. I was in a recovering program at the Healing Place, but it was the St. Stephen's Church in Louisville, Kentucky. Both at Thanksgiving and Christmas would take every homeless person in town and feed them. And the fun that we had, and the music, and we had nothing, but we had each other, and we had this sense of hope that is given to us. It's the grace of God, and just the realization that there are people who care about us, people who really, really do care to make sure that we are okay. It gave me a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and that just developed over and over again. Now I'm on the other end. I give, but I'll never forget those Christmases where I spent there with the grace of those folks, and to learn this wonderful holiday, and to be able to give back today. I love it. I love Christmas.
What is the meaning of true love? You've talked about that before.
The meaning of true love is being of ultimate service to others. That is the definition of what love. And that's why we were created. We were created to love. And again, that definition of being of ultimate service to others, for those of us in recovery, we know what that is. That's the 12th step of this program. We give all year long. We have that open porthole to communication. We really do, to God as you choose to understand Him, because we work for the family business. When you go through these steps, remember, you're the one who has the solution to the greatest health problem in the United States of America. They don't have it at Yale. They don't have it at Harvard. They don't have it at Duke. You do. You have the solution. Just the role in society you play alone is just absolutely magnificent. But at this time of the year, to be able to give that gift, to be able to help another person who is suffering, not only from their addiction, but to be able to give them a life, to be able to give them Christmas. Do you know what it's like to give someone Christmas who hasn't had it in years and years and years? What an incredible feeling that is. And you don't have to buy them tons and tons of gifts. You bring them into the culture, into our lifestyle, and just let them feel the love. And that's what Christmas is all about. It's that love. And we in Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous are bubbling with it.
That's a beautiful thing. I mean, the way you say that is a beautiful thing, because before we started this segment, before we turned the microphones on, I started talking about Christmas. I've talked about this before.
Bah humbug, bah humbug.
Well, I'm not saying bah humbug, but I'm just saying it's a little bit difficult for me.
And I understand.
To kind of come around to where you are. And just by having this conversation that we've had on the air, which I wish we would have had off the air, is where I can get out of my own head. And not that I live in a one-bedroom apartment by myself. No. I have a wonderful family. But to be able to get out of that mindset that, oh, man, it's Christmas again. And, this is not my favorite time of the year because my memories are not that great. And I don't have that.
We're making new ones.
You watch these movies on TV and everybody's coming together by the fireplace and they've got their drinks and their hot toddies or whatever they're doing. That kind of stuff for me is very difficult to absorb and become a part of. But, in light of what you're talking about, maybe I just need to get out of my own head.
It is.
Why am I the one that always has the problem?
Well, because I'm a little more sober than you are.
Well, you are. You've got quite a few years on me. I've got 11 years. You've got
It's just, I've watched you over the last year just grow tremendously. And that's how we grow in Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. Just a little tiny bit at a time, like a blade of grass. That's how we grow. And that's, if you look at how the ancient Greeks looked at their belief in God, it was just from that. They believed that everything had something in common with God. Even a stone or a rock, it had something in common because it was. That blade of grass or a flower, it had something more in common with God because it was, and it's alive. Dogs and cats, things of that nature, they have what's called a sensitive life. And what that is, they feel. They have that emotion. Your dog, Turbo, yell at Turbo and watch that little tail go between his legs. Or if you go down to the store and get some milk and you come back and it's like you've been gone for a minute, they feel. You see, they've got that's a sensitive
Well,
life.
He's a good boy.
He is a good boy. He is. Man, what we can think and we can love. And we keep going up this process. And as they believe, why not one element just above us, just above that? That's how I believe it, and that's how they believed it. Maybe it's an easy way for you to understand that there is a process of developing a relationship with a power greater than yourself that is tangible.
Well, the holidays are upon us, and David Rotenberg is coming up. We've had David on before.
David's the best, man. He's here from Caron, and he'll have some great information, his take on the holidays, as well as those of you who may have a youngster who has had an addiction issue, how to, as a family, deal with it, cope with it, and make it a happy occasion.
Well, we're your hosts. I'm Rich, the little blade of grass, and Jerry.
I'll be the dog, all right?
All right. Jerry with his incentive life over there and his feelings. He is a sober alcoholic, and this show is brought to you by Caron Treatment Centers. Caron is a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment, and Caron specializes in men's and women's services, as well as young adult males and females, plus a relapse program and relapse services. If you're concerned about yourself or a loved one, call 1-800-854-6023, or you can go to their website. That's Caron.org. That's CARON.org. David Rotenberg on the way. This is Trudge the Road on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Jerry sits down and talks to David Rotenberg, the Vice President of Clinical Treatment at Caron, and he discusses staying sober at the holidays and also how difficult it is for young people in treatment. That's next on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
There is a new face of recovery, and you see it in the pages of Renew Magazine and at RenewEveryday.com. Renew and RenewEveryday.com are changing the face of recovery for good. Each issue is filled with positive role models, life-affirming stories, encouragement, and ideas to help any life in recovery. Whether you're already enjoying an addiction-free life, have a loved one facing his challenges, or are considering recovery, Renew and RenewEveryday.com can support and inspire you. Join us. Check out RenewEveryday.com to learn more.
Hi, this is Rich, your co-host for the Trudge the Road radio program, and there's a question I get all the time, and that is, how do we catch prior episodes of Trudge the Road if we miss the radio show? And it's very simple. You just go to youtube.com and in the search engine, type in, without any spaces, Trudge the Road Radio, and all our shows will come up. We also invite you to like our Facebook page, which can be found by typing Trudge the Road Radio with spaces into the search engine. And thank you from Jerry and myself for listening to Trudge the Road.
Welcome back to Trudge the Road on the Trudge the Road Radio Network. And Trudge the Road is brought to you by Caron Treatment Centers. Caron is a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment with treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, with offices in Bermuda, Boston, New York, Philly, and Washington, D.C. Now, you can reach them by calling 800-854-6023, or you can visit their website, which has a lot of information. It's Caron.org. That's CARON.org. A lot of answers to the dilemma of addiction. And that's what Trudge the Road is all about. This is a radio program dedicated to people who suffer from the disease of addiction to alcohol and to drugs. And every bit as important, family and friends, you suffer tremendously, and we know you have tons of questions, and that's why we're here to try to answer some of those questions, and with the grace of the good Lord, hopefully bring a solution to this dilemma. We brought a pro in. He's been here before, and we're honored to have Dave Rotenberg back. Dave is the Vice President of Treatment at Caron, and a recognized professional throughout the industry with a number of letters behind your name. We could go on about all of your credentials and your accomplishments, but we just know you as Dave, and you're a really good dude. Thank you very much for being here, man.
Always great to be here, Jerry.
We hopefully be able to get into a couple of things, but what we're upon right now is the holidays, and this can be a very tricky time for those of us who suffer from the disease of addiction, as well as family members. Everybody kind of go, oh, here it comes, you know. And I know that you have an interesting take on this, and I think that you can offer some help to everybody. And if you would do that, we'd be incredibly grateful.
No question. You know, when you think about family, and I understand a lot of parents are listening to our program these days, which is awesome. Really appreciate hearing that. You think about, you know, along with school and peer involvement, you think of family as one of the relapse triggers for a kid or a young adult in recovery. There's a lot of family dynamics out there. You think of actual in-your-face relapse triggers like alcohol. You think of grandma's purse with her pills. You think of the medicine cabinet upstairs if you're on a visit. You think of so many different things when you think of family, not to mention just the emotion of family in early recovery, which can be very devastating for a kid. You know, if you have a kid who's been in treatment, who is in treatment, or who's just getting out of treatment, the emotion of the parent-child conflict of the last several years is residue that sticks. It doesn't just go away.
Doesn't resolve overnight.
No way, man. And I think parents have a misperception that in 28 days, if I put my kid in treatment, that somehow it's like a broken leg with the cast coming off, and they'll come home and all that parent-child conflict will be fixed. The fact is, parents have their own set of symptoms, just like the drug addict and the alcoholic.
Do you think that the holidays, and it's kind of a strange question, it brings out, if you will, the worst of us, the worst in us?
Jerry, you know that when you're in recovery or using over the holidays, you're feeling lonely, you're feeling entitled to use because your peers are doing it. You're at a time for adolescents and young adults where, you know, Christmas vacation, New Year's Eve, and maybe prom season and senior week are like four of the most dangerous times on the adolescent young adult calendar. Everyone's off of school. Most are not working. You can fit in easy with your peers because they're all drinking and getting high. I think, you know, you talk to parents who are trying to keep a kid and a young adult sober. You're saying, hey, you know that their emotions are raw. It's a time for you to be on point with your own program, meaning your own Al-Anon, your own family therapy. It's a time for you to understand that a kid in early recovery feels like a 15-year-old, but is more like an infant who's just left the hospital. You know what I mean? They're still trying to find their way in the world. They're very vulnerable. They don't quite know where they fit, where they should go, how they should feel, where they should be. It's a very difficult time for people early in recovery, young people early in recovery.
Absolutely. I remember that, I could count on that C-note from Aunt Margaret coming every Christmas, and, where that always led to. Just to address, and we do have a lot of people we have found out who are parents who do have children, and we have in previous programs discussed the new face of addiction, and it is youngsters, and it's an epidemic, and it's phenomenal. And here are parents out there, and we know this for a fact from good homes who absolutely love their children, provide for them, and hopefully give them a plan for them a future, are the ones who are being devastated the most and have just a tremendous amount of questions. Why is this happening in this culture right now?
Why is this happening, man? Indeed. I think the flood of information, the availability of information through technology, the virtual peer network that's promoting the hell out of, using and different drugs and different forms of making drugs and getting drugs and obtaining drugs, promoting them in terms of, outcomes. It's not negative. It's much more positive when you read peer feedback via the internet. So I think why it's always happened, but I think the flood of information, the flood of availability makes the age of onset an earlier age of onset. You're seeing that across the spectrum. With pathology, not just with drugs and alcohol, but really with sexual behavior, gambling, any number of issues that have been linked to the drug and alcohol world previously are starting to creep into our world earlier and earlier.
Now, what you've had to learn here at Caron and as a treatment professional is basically a new language. They have the teen speak, if you will. It's its own language of its own that defines, I suppose, to a certain degree, its culture.
Brother, that's perfectly said. If you want to treat adolescents and young adults, you better know their culture. You better know their style. You better know what certain words mean. You better understand technology. You would not go into a Hispanic cultural center for a job and not have a good working knowledge of Hispanic culture and language, or you'd be at a
tremendous loss,
tremendous deficit. And I think the same is true for professionals, certainly school-based clinical professionals who work with young people, but also parents would do themselves a favor by integrating and gaining a measure of insight into adolescent young adult speak. I think it would be helpful to relate. It would be helpful from a parenting perspective, just in terms of where's this kid at. What's he or she doing and thinking, and what's moving them along? The ideals and values that I grew up with and the expectations that I grew up with have changed. I need to understand what my kid's thinking, what my daughter's feeling, what pressures are on her, how to look, how to feel, etc. And I think that all goes into not only being a provider, but being a well-integrated parent these days.
So it's a complicated measure, to say the least.
Brother, it's always been complicated, and now there's more of everything out there for these kids.
Well, if we go back and Rich over there, you're a little bit younger than we are, but as baby boomers, back in the late 60s and 70s, we were described as just incredibly complicated, misled, and in comparison to that, well, it's just a cakewalk from it was that back then to today.
Even my I graduated high school in '85. You had your core group of like 5 friends, and then you had another 10 or 15 in your circle out there. But nowadays, you got 1 million strong peers telling you this, that, and the other. You got a click of a button telling you about this, that, or the other latest, greatest thing. You have media blitz. You have marketing specifically targeting these age groups for the what's next, whether it's a caffeine drink, whether it's the latest fashion trend, you name it, it's out there and it's coming your way.
Absolutely. Now, the demeanor of acceptance within this community when it comes to drugs is pretty phenomenal. It always has been in that demographic, but this is just completely off the charts, if I'm not mistaken.
Off the charts is right. I mean, when you talk about weed, you're talking about this generation believes that weed should be legal. This generation believes through the media that it's a rite of passage to smoke weed. It's encouraged. And oh, by the way, what this generation doesn't understand, I don't think, is that the weed of today is depending on who you ask, it's 10 to 30 times stronger than our weed. Think about that. And then you think about the developing brain in adolescent. You think about decision making, you think about impulse control, stuff that we study in clinical work, and you understand the impact of marijuana, weed, on those dynamics, and the fact that the brain continues to develop not to 18, which is what we used to think,
right,
but well into the mid-20s.
Right.
And so you're smoking hydroponic weed on top of your developing brain. You are having a tremendous impact well into your mid-20s. And then we wonder and we scratch our heads, why are kids living at home longer? Why are they taking longer to develop? Tie what I just said into that, and you have a synergy that delays development, delays adulthood, delays decision-making, and impacts impulse control far longer than we used to think.
So then when you get a youngster here at Caron in treatment and you get them detox, you get all of the drugs out of their system, then you're dealing with someone incredibly raw, incredibly immature, with no ability to be decisive, almost, as you said earlier in this conversation, an infant.
Oh, by the way, and I've also spent 4 or 5 years trying to develop my identity as this tough partying kid or this
Right.
cool girl over here. And now you're telling me not only do I have to undo all the stuff you just mentioned, Jerry, but I got to develop a new identity as a sober person. How do I do that? It's daunting. It's unreachable for certain teens, or feels that way. I go back to our original dialogue, which is that parents need to understand that 4 weeks is just the tip of the iceberg. It's a long process, one day at a time, but a long process, identity development in the positive direction. Who am I? Am I a sober person? Do I like myself as a sober person? Maybe not right away. Ask anyone who's gotten in early recovery,
Of course, yeah.
and they'll tell you it is a brutal time. It's very difficult. I don't know who I am or where I fit. And all those feelings, combined with the fact that in adolescent and young adulthood, I'm feeling left out. I know all my friends are doing this, that, and the other. And that's a time, that's an age group where your popularity soars sometimes when you're a partier.
Sure.
You get more girlfriends when you're a partier. It's the only age group where you can be a promiscuous, drug-dealing criminal.
And be the guy.
And be the guy and get a positive standing in your community of peers. Think about that. And all that stuff is tied to the kids that we're treating, the young adults we're treating at Caron. All those dynamics.
The beauty of this treatment, this isn't a theoretical process. This is something you do, and we have seen the results, and they are marvelous. They may take a little bit of time, but the results are good, and they do work.
The results are good, and they do work. If you see a young person in recovery, slap them on the back twice, man, because that's not easy to do. Think about all the stuff we've said today. It's not easy to stay clean as a young person, but more and more communities are understanding how to do it. You can't just send a young person to AA.
Right.
You've got to have young people's meetings. Mm-hmm. You've got to have sober high schools. You've got to have towns in this country that cater to sober young adults so that they can do college. You can't just go to college and live in a dorm as a sober kid and get and stay sober that way. You've got to have recovery houses. You've got to have halfway houses that cater and have liaisons to local community college and other colleges. We have a number of towns that we market, not treatment centers per se, but towns. Scranton, Pennsylvania, Boca Raton, Florida. I can send your young adult male or female there and know that they're going to be insulated and actually be able to live a young adult sober life and negotiate the workforce and or college.
It gives them the opportunity to mature, if nothing else, just regular maturity, spiritual maturity, emotional maturity. It all has to take place in that environment without those stresses. I just know that from my own experience as being somebody who got here when they were 20 years old and couldn't stay because of that.
No doubt, man. And tie that back to the identity development piece that I mentioned several times today. A sober town, insulating a bunch of young adults in recovery. Guess what? I can feel like a sober person at the age of 21, and I can actually feel like I belong there. I'm not an outsider.
Let's find out more, because I think that's an exceptionally great idea, and I love the way that you think. We'll come back and we'll chat more with David Rotenberg. This is Trudge the Road on the Trudge the Road Radio Network, brought to you by Caron Treatment Centers. Caron is a nonprofit leading provider of drugs and alcohol addiction treatment, specializing in men's and women's services as well as young adult males and females, plus a relapse program and relapse services. If you are concerned about yourself or a loved one, here's the phone number. It's 800-854-6023. Or go to the website, which is caron.org. We spell that CARON.org. And I think you're going to find some wonderful, wonderful information there. We appreciate that. We'll be back with David Rotenberg more on Trudge the Road on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Jerry continues his discussion with David Rotenberg and youth in treatment. That's next on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
There is a new phase of recovery, and you see it in the pages of Renew Magazine and at RenewEveryday.com. Renew and RenewEveryday.com are changing the face of recovery for good. Each issue is filled with positive role models, life-affirming stories, encouragement, and ideas to help any life in recovery. Whether you're already enjoying an addiction-free life, have a loved one facing his challenges, or are considering recovery, Renew and RenewEveryday.com can support and inspire you. Join us. Check out RenewEveryday.com to learn more.
Hi, this is Rich, your co-host for the Trudge the Road radio program, and there's a question I get all the time, and that is, how do we catch prior episodes of Trudge the Road if we miss the radio show? And it's very simple. You just go to youtube.com and in the search engine, type in, without any spaces, Trudge the Road Radio, and all our shows will come up. We also invite you to like our Facebook page, which can be found by typing Trudge the Road Radio with spaces into the search engine. And thank you from Jerry and myself for listening to Trudge the Road.
Hi, and welcome back to Trudge the Road on the Trudge the Road Radio Network. My name is Jerry. I'm a sober alcoholic. And Trudge Road is brought to you by Caron Treatment Centers. Caron is a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment with treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, Florida, great place in Texas. They have offices in Bermuda, Boston, New York, Philly, and D.C. You can reach them by calling 800-854-6023, or you can visit the website, which is caron.org, CARON.org. Trudge the Road is a radio program which is dedicated to people who suffer from the disease of addiction to alcohol and drugs. And every bit as important, family members and friends, we know you have a lot of questions. We hope to be able to provide you some answers and ultimately, with the grace of the good Lord, a solution to this incredible dilemma. To those of you listening who are in recovery, if you wouldn't mind, when you're at a meeting and they ask for those non-AA related announcements, if you'd bring up Trudge the Road, you can get it on YouTube. Just Trudge the Road Radio on the search engine, and all the shows will pop up. Our guest this morning is David Rotenberg here from Caron, Vice President of Treatment, and in a past episode, and I'm sure we'll be in many, many more. Thank you very much for being here. I really do appreciate it, David. Thank you.
Always love being here, Jerry. Shout out to Father Bill, Reverend Jack, and Mike Early. Love you guys.
They are three of the most remarkable human beings on earth. And there's nothing I could say. I just adore them. Listen, we were talking in the last segment a little bit about something that, really stretches maybe the imagination of what we have known in the treatment field, and that is a creation of sober communities. We notice sober houses, but you're talking sober communities, sober towns, sober campus, environments where the people who are most affected by this dreaded disease right now, youngsters, can have an opportunity to be able to recover, because for them, within their own environment, in their own culture, it's very difficult.
I love the idea that more and more people are noticing that to have a sober kid is to have sober 12-step young people's meetings, is to have a sober high school. If you look in the state of Minnesota, they've got 10 to 12 sober high schools. Well, the state of Minnesota is really one of the leaders, or the leader, in terms of recognizing what we're talking about.
I know that my parents, certainly when I was 20 years old and seeking treatment for the first time, were definitely under the impression that 28 days I was going to have in that treatment center was going to solve those problems, which of course barely addressed them. And the point that I think you've tried to make and did so well in the last segment is this continuum process of recovery, which must, for this particular demographic, stay intense really for a period of time till that brain develops. And as you said, we thought that was at 18, and that's not the case at all.
The brain continues to develop well into your 20s. Okay, more and more potent drugs, more and more potent weed, more of everything out there is impacting brain development, slowing it down, taking it in different directions, as the case may be, impacting decision making. Going back to your original statement in this segment is, hey, parents, 28 days in treatment is just the tip of the iceberg. When you leave treatment,
is when your recovery begins.
Absolutely. Your recovery begins. You're most vulnerable. Again, the analogy I use is you're like a baby leaving the hospital, man. You're an infant, and you've got to learn to walk eventually. But you're going to rely on others. Being alone can be quite dangerous. In early recovery, man, you cannot go back to your old peer group. Their parties, the internet nowadays is a standalone relapse trigger in the internet. When you talk about the patients we're seeing, young adult, adolescent, and even adult, you're talking about the relapse and addictive interaction disorder as a significant relapse trigger. You go on the internet, you see anything from porn sites to the next best thing in drugs and alcohol, to gambling, to gaming, and the kids off and running. Okay,
right.
I think it's just a different world than when you were 20, Jerry. And I think parents need to recognize that to get sober and to stay sober requires a lot. It requires 12-step involvement. In most cases, it requires psychological, psychiatric intervention. A lot of young people in drug and alcohol treatment have co-occurring disorders, psychiatric co-occurring disorders. Up to 85% of kids.
I was going to say it's more the norm.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Well, it's almost an antiquated notion to find a person under 30 who's a garden variety in quote alcoholic. They're all polysubstance dependent, 3 or more drugs, and 1 or even 2 co-occurring psychiatric disorders. So really, to stay sober is a multi-layered, multi-systemic, integrated treatment that includes 12-step psychiatry, spirituality, physical fitness, the right nutrition, the family going to their own counseling and Al-Anon in their own 12-step program.
Right.
And even in that framework, in an ideal world, when you're talking about young people, if you don't insulate them from negative peer involvement and all the other stuff we've been talking about this morning, it's a huge challenge.
Well, let me just pose a question. If this definite imperfect issue that we're dealing with in the imperfect world, if it was perfect, if you could, say this is how we're going to establish treatment and this is going to work, you're talking about sober high schools, sober communities, sober towns, sober campuses, things of this nature, correct?
In a perfect world, you'd leave primary treatment and you'd do some kind of extended care. Then you'd step down from extended care and you'd do sober high school, sober college town like Scranton or Boca or, the 2 we mentioned earlier. You'd live in a recovery house. Okay, you'd continue, obviously, the whole time you'd continue with strong 12-step involvement and all the other dynamics we just described. You'd stay there long term and you'd stay in a what we would call a recovery care management program where you would stay connected to a place like Caron for at least a year post discharge, where we're doing, we have a counselor who's staying in touch with you. We're doing urine screens randomly, keeping you honest there. We're supporting the family system. We're wondering if you're coming back here to Caron for breakthrough. Breakthrough on this campus, 6 months and a year sober, you should be coming back to breakthrough. For, anyone who's from a family system of addiction should be coming back here to breakthrough. You got like the best program in the entire country right here, 100 yards from where we're doing this interview, Jerry.
Yeah, we're anxious to talk to Tara, we talked to her just as she was about to walk in the door. Tara Connor, Miss USA, and anxious to see how it went for her. I'm sure it's going to be a great story.
That's right. I mean, that again, when you're talking about taking your recovery next level, you do 6 months of recovery in the real world, and then you come back for breakthrough and you tune it up even more for next level recovery. That's a life-changing program.
Absolutely.
And it's only 5 days. Okay, when you consider how much time and energy your active addiction and your family system has taken you, doing a 5-day program that's a life changer is everything to me. Everyone should be doing it.
I can't. Well, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I've often dropped that to hint around here.
Well, we can set that up, man.
I like the sound of that. I'm the first one in the door. Just to right now, we don't have a lot of time left, and I want you to, and I know you so well can, the parent who's listening right now, who's just frightened, who is concerned, is got a lot of questions. What should they do today? The parent who's got questions, in other words, pre-rehab, right? Like
hasn't done the whole gamut of stuff. I mean, you should definitely. The first thing I want to do is establish an open, honest household where the kid doesn't have to creep around. If you can do that, you've already had a victory. But the parent who's already on sort of edge and thinking something's amiss here. I mean, if you really, you don't have to put a kid in rehab and pack a suitcase first thing. In fact, most of the patients that come to Caron actually have an outpatient provider before they ever come to residential, okay? Take that, do a little research and find an outpatient provider in your local area. Your health insurance will probably help you go there.
Right.
And figure out, even if it's not with the kid, set up an appointment and talk to that professional. Talk to that drug and alcohol professional. Another way to do it is there, school-based professionals, student assistance programs. They're in most schools on the East Coast nowadays. I know Caron has probably 200-300 student assistance people in our East Coast schools. There's another way in there. But if you're, it's a misconception that intervention is just packing a suitcase and putting a kid in rehab. In fact, most of the front door is actually done on an outpatient basis in a quiet office on a one-to-one where, a trained clinician can answer your questions, can talk about doing urine screens, and hopefully they're cool enough that they can establish a rapport with your kid so that he's even or she's willing to even go back. I think that's a critical piece to an outpatient person who's dealing with young people. Whether the kid's staying sober or not, whether there's more questions than answers, is the outpatient person cool enough and culturally literate enough,
That's just
Jerry,
a question I was going to ask you.
man,
Yeah.
to bring the kid back?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because that's the entry. That's the first impression that the kid's going to have of the treatment industry, okay, which makes that outpatient provider a critical component to everything we do. Because you're setting, if the kid doesn't like outpatient and doesn't like the provider, they're not going to want to go to any form of treatment. Inpatient, outpatient, AA, 12-step, you name it. They're not going to want it because their first impression was negative. But if the person's cool and culturally literate and can meet the kid where they're at, sober or not, the kid's more likely to at least be willing to go back.
And that's just the incredible part. Now, just before we go, we only got a couple of seconds left. The holidays are coming up. And you, like me, I think we look forward to the holidays. Always wasn't the case with myself. You know,
my God.
In that early part of sobriety, all the fear, all the anxiety. And yet to find out, over the years, I was, because of the alcohol, I'd lost all my senses. I couldn't smell. I couldn't taste. All the texture of the holiday. That when I finally began to realize that, and begin to appreciate it as I grew in my sobriety. But as we brought up last segment, it wasn't the first Christmas. You know what I mean?
Remember your earliest Christmases when you were using?
Oh, well, they're a blur.
They're a blur. Your family was on edge.
They were terrified.
Or you weren't there. So if you were there, you might have ruined the thing. If you weren't there, they had to worry about where you were and if you were alive. And I think now, when you're a sober person and you're at the holidays, even though it can be an emotionally raw time, I think don't forget why you got sober. You got sober to get your family back. You got sober to be around your loved ones. You got sober to give instead of taking. I think a good way to describe an active drug addict alcoholic is they're always taking. They're taking your peace of mind. They're taking your money. They're taking meds out of your pocketbook. They're taking everything. And I think family at the holidays allows you to give back, to give peace of mind, to be present, to not be the, unpredictable alcoholic that you used to be. You can be a predictable, sober alcoholic these days. I think there's so many good things to celebrate about the holidays.
This is terrific. David Rotenberg, you're the best. And I know that you'll be back many, many times. And I know that you've helped a lot of people around the United States today. And we appreciate you being here on Trudge the Road, man. You're the best.
I can't wait to come back, Jerry.
All right. That's David Rotenberg, ladies and gentlemen. This is Trudge the Road, brought to you by Caron Treatment Centers, a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment. Caron specializes in men's and women's services, as well as young adult males and females, plus a relapse program and relapse services. If you are concerned about yourself or a loved one, their phone number is 800-854-6023, or you can go online to their website, which is caron.org. That's CARON.org. Also, again, don't forget about YouTube. You'll be able to find us. Go to YouTube and just type in Trudge the Road Radio. All of our episodes will pop up if you don't have it on a local radio station where you're listening to right now. This is Trudge the Road. We'll be back in just a moment on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Rich and Jerry discuss the importance of meditation in recovery. That's next on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
There is a new phase of recovery, and you see it in the pages of Renew Magazine and at RenewEveryday.com. Renew and RenewEveryday.com are changing the face of recovery for good. Each issue is filled with positive role models, life-affirming stories, encouragement, and ideas to help any life in recovery. Whether you're already enjoying an addiction-free life, have a loved one facing his challenges, or are considering recovery, Renew and RenewEveryday.com can support and inspire you. Join us. Check out RenewEveryday.com to learn more.
Hi, this is Rich, your co-host for the Trudge the Road radio program. And there's a question I get all the time, and that is, how do we catch prior episodes of Trudge the Road if we miss the radio show? And it's very simple. You just go to youtube.com and in the search engine, type in, without any spaces, Trudge the Road Radio, and all our shows will come up. We also invite you to like our Facebook page, which can be found by typing Trudge the Road Radio with spaces into the search engine. And thank you from Jerry and myself for listening to Trudge the Road. Welcome back to Trudge the Road. Trudge the Road is brought to you by Caron Treatment Centers. Caron, a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment with treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, and offices in Bermuda, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. They can be reached by calling 1-800-854-6023, or you can visit their website at caron.org. That's CARON.org. We're your hosts. I'm Rich, a recovered drug addict.
My name is Jerry, and I'm a sober alcoholic.
Let's start off the fourth segment, Jerry, by telling everybody why we do this show.
Trudge the Road is a radio program dedicated to people like Rich and myself who suffer from the disease of addiction to alcohol and drugs. And every bit as important is the family and friends. You suffer tremendously. We know you've got a lot of questions. That's why we're here to try and answer some of those questions and with the good grace of God, provide a solution to this incredible dilemma, addiction.
Hey, thanks to David Rotenberg for coming in.
Sweet guy,
Yeah,
man.
I mean, really, he is, I think he used the word demonstrative.
I did.
And I really like the word, although it was difficult for me to just say it. But he really is. He's a powerful speaker. He seems to cut through, and he seems to make that eye connection with people through the radio. I know that every time I listen to a David Rotenberg talk, he really connects with whatever he's talking about. And, of course, this week, holidays, which are among us. 3 words, Jerry: practice daily meditation.
Yes.
Do you agree?
Yes, I do.
It's very important.
It is.
To take some time aside. You know, we hear the saying that everybody who's in treatment has ADD. I will tell you right out of the gate that I feel like I have. It's tough for me to concentrate on one thing. So sometimes I have to kind of step out on a daily basis, close myself in a room and stay away from everybody and really just focus on something positive. And it keeps my head still. It's stilling of the mind, you know, the calming of the mind. Very difficult thing to do.
It's very difficult. It's a process. It's something that I think that we have to learn. I don't know if I'll ever perfect it. I have my own way. Everybody's kind of got their own way of meditation. I told you this story one time before about when I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and there were a group of folks, with this over the Token 3 Club, who meditated kind of in, you know, the traditional way, I guess, you know, with incense or whatever. I'm not sure.
Right.
But, man, were they together just so calm and serene and at peace. And you know, I liked what I saw. I
Right.
said, that's some neat stuff. So I started asking them questions about their meditation, and they could not have been kinder. Just said, absolutely, you're more than welcome. Come participate, and we will show you how to do this. Great. So I went, and, you know, we sat on the pillows, you know, and there was a lot of this very light music in the background. And the lady said to me, Jerry, empty your mind of all thoughts. What? You know, empty your mind of all thoughts. Something I'd never tried to do before. And it takes practice, you know, and you would get there. It's almost a sense of nirvana. But with me, just as I would get to that peak, that little voice in the back of my mind would go off and say, did you go to Wendy's twice today? You know, it wouldn't, you know, whatever ADD, I don't know. I'm never able to achieve that, you know, total sense. But that's okay, too. You know, meditation is prayer without words. And what I found in my beginning process was music. You know, when you listen to music, you know, ever listen to a favorite song, it just kind of takes you away.
Right.
You know, well, that for me was a process of being able to get out of myself a little bit and listen to this music and not think and to try to listen, you know, and at first it just feels kind of dumb. You know, it just, and again, it's a process. It's something that you have to learn. And then that connectedness happens. And it does every single time. Remember, we've got that porthole to communication to that power greater than ourselves. And when you honestly make that effort, and I believe this 100%, when you honestly make that effort, the reciprocation always comes back. And when you make that connectedness, oh, man, it's a wonderful thing. And you don't have to do it, you know, at a particular time every day. I can do it any time of the day I want. Or when I'm stressed or when things aren't going right, I'll stop and I'll do that quiet time thing and be able to make that connection and re-energize myself and be able to go on. Because that fear and that emotion still, even being a recovering person, can overwhelm me at times. And that's when I've got to stop and use this process to kind of put it all back into order and make me a better person, really, a much better person.
I can remember when I first came in contact with someone who had suggested meditation. It was in an anger management class after
really?
I had been busted for crystal meth. That's a true story.
Sure.
And one of the portions of the class was, after you had gone to meetings and stuff, was to go to a room where they had yoga mats laid out and they played like ocean music. And then you just sat there for like a half hour. You'd lay on the mat, you'd sit up, and they would tell you to calm your mind and be peaceful. Very difficult for me. But after I got out of the class and got set back into the free world and left to my own devices, of course, I'd screw up again. So what I would do is try to convince myself that if I just meditated, I would be able to beat this thing. And so I would put on headphones and, and listen. I got to tell you right out of the gate, Kaja Gugu is not the band.
Too shy,
Not a good band to try to meditate to. But you know what? I find what you had talked about earlier as far as, find something and then put your headphones on or whatever. Find some time, 5-10 minutes, even if it's music. Stevie Ray Vaughan works great for me.
That's what your thing is at, what your thing is. We can go back to traditional religious ways of meditation. And if you were brought up within the Catholic religion, you may have prayed the rosary. That's what the rosary is for. It's a repetitive process that brings you to a meditative state. A repetitive process that brings you to a meditative state. On that same venue, for me, there's another source that I use for deep meditation. And in our community, there is a monastery, which is run by the Dominican nuns. And they pray 24 hours a day. And anybody can go into this monastery and sit. And you can hear the nuns praying or maybe hear them singing. It's quiet and they're off in another room. But to just sit in that environment, and that's all I do. I just sit and try to be quiet and absorb that energy that is there for me, that is tangible. And, it answers questions. It really does. And that's when I'll go in there when I do have questions. What is the next right thing to do? Sometimes I need help, and in that environment, I always get it. So there's different ways that I meditate. And I guess when it comes to situations in my life and how prevalent they are and what attention that they need as to the directive I should take.
Well, we're talking about meditation right now and how important it is in recovery. And it truly is because, as we've spoken about already in this segment, it's very difficult to quiet our minds. And at times, and we have these conversations sometimes.
Very difficult.
When you go to sleep at night. My room at night, now that it's colder outside, it's not summertime. I don't have the air conditioning, that hum. I used to fall into the rhythm of the hum.
White noise, yeah.
And now I don't have that, so it's very quiet, and you can allow these negative thoughts to get into your mind. So it's important to dissipate these thoughts. So I find some time during the day to help dissipate a lot of these negative thoughts, and that's why I think meditation is so important.
Now, I can, if we want a deep psychological suggestion on how you may want to overcome that, buy a fan. I'm just saying out loud, maybe that'll help a little bit.
Something to get the groove of your mind focused on one thing, and that can take place during the day as well.
And as David put it so well in early recovery, when we're in those first few months, that first year, you can look at it as the ocean and you're the beach, and that waves just keep coming in and coming out, coming in and coming out. And it's so hard to calm that sea in your head. It takes time, and that's what the 12 steps are all about, is to be able to bring to conclusion the issues in our life that cause those waves to continually smash against the beach. And when they do, it's just a calm sea. And that's how you are. Just imagine that. The beautiful, calm ocean, maybe with the sun setting over it. That's what meditation is to me. I can picture that. I like to go there in that exact environment within my head. I know you do the same thing.
Remember when I got back from Emerald Isle a couple of months ago? You
were wonderful for about 15 minutes. I've got some big news, though.
Okay.
It doesn't include you. I'm sorry. But it does include Matt, the producer.
Okay.
I want to start a band. Yeah, and Matt is a brilliant musician,
right.
Wonderful musician. And I'm going to call it Jerry and the Resentments.
Ah, I like that.
What do you think?
Yeah, there's Matt off mic. We need to get him on mic so he can chime in, or just
Absolutely.
one of those things that sounds like he's on a phone. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
But see, with his incredible, musical ability and my sense of creativity, something good's got to come out of that. And we play all over the country, like at AA conferences and stuff. Jerry and the Resentments.
All right, you run with that.
Featuring Matt.
This is Trudge the Road. It is brought to you by Caron Treatment Centers. Caron is a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment. Caron specializes in men's and women's services, as well as young adult males and females, plus a relapse program program and relapse services. If you're concerned about yourself or a loved one, call 1-800-854-6023, or you can go to their website. That's Caron.org. That's CARON.org. And just a reminder, our website is up there, and we have email contacts. If you'd like to shoot Jerry, myself, even Matt, the producer, an email, just go there. It's TrudgeTheRoadRadio.com. For Jerry, did you have something to say? You're kind of
I just wanted to remind Matt to make sure you bring some instruments, a couple of guitars, a bass, your tuba. That would be handy, and I'll take care of everything else.
For Jerry, I'm Rich. This is Trudge the Road on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
You've been listening to Trudge the Road. If you'd like to catch prior episodes, you can visit our website, TrudgeTheRoadRadio.com, and keep listening for new episodes on this great radio station, which is part of the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
Thank you for listening to Trudge the Road. The opinions expressed in the show are those of myself, Jerry, my co-host, Rich, and our guests, and not necessarily those of the Caron Treatment Centers. For more information regarding the show, go to our website, TrudgeTheRoadRadio.com. There is a new phase of recovery, and you see it in the pages of Renew Magazine and at RenewEveryday.com. Renew and RenewEveryday.com are changing the face of recovery for good. Each issue is filled with positive role models, life-affirming stories, encouragement, and ideas to help any life in recovery. Whether you're already enjoying an addiction-free life, have a loved one facing his challenges, or are considering recovery, Renew and RenewEveryday.com can support and inspire you. Join us. Check out RenewEveryday.com to learn more.